Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. Today, we're going to break down everything from last weekend at the box office, including the Super Mario Galaxy movie and Project Hail Mary, which continue to be an effective 1-2 punch. So let's jump right into the latest results, and we will start with the top 10 from last weekend. I got some feedback. I'm going to try going through the whole top 10 first before diving into each individual movie. You let me know which one you like better. At number 1 was the Super Mario Galaxy movie, of course, for a second straight weekend. It dropped 48.3% for a $68 million weekend. Its domestic total is now over $300 million. There's really nothing to complain about as far as its performance, especially compared to budget, but it's worth noting that the first Super Mario Bros. Movie dropped 36.9% in weekend number 2, so we are seeing a steeper decline with the second movie than the first movie, which is not uncommon when we're talking about sequels. Still, like I said, nothing wrong with the financial performance of the film whatsoever. Project Hail Mary, speaking of nothing wrong with the financial performance, dropped 23.9% in its fourth weekend, brought in another $24.1 million. Its domestic total now at $256.2 million, and I was reading that it's getting back some of its premium screens this weekend. They're doing some weekend evening screenings of Project Hail Mary now that the first 2 weekends of Super Mario is out of the way. So we could see another good hold for this upcoming weekend as well. The drama also holding well. It dropped 39.4% for an $8.7 million weekend. Its domestic total now over $30 million, which is notable for an A24 film. We're going to look at that in a couple minutes. Yumi and Tuscany didn't find a whole lot of room in the marketplace. It brought in $7.7 million on its opening weekend. There's just a lot going on at the box office right now. Not a whole lot of wide appeal for that film. Hoppers stayed in the top 5. It dropped 28.6% for a $4.1 million weekend. It's now at $157.1 million domestically. In sixth place was a live viewing of BTS's concert from South Korea, which brought in $2.4 million. There is another live viewing coming up this weekend of a concert from Tokyo, Japan, so we could well see BTS repeat in the top 10. At number 7 was the new horror film Faces of Death, which opened to $1.6 million. Then we have Exit 8, which was actually a limited release. It came in at $1.4 million. A Great Awakening, which got that A+ cinema score, just doesn't have the broad enough audience appeal to really crack out of the 6 through 10 spot. It brought in $1.28 million. It's at $4.9 million domestically. And Reminders of Him spends another week in the top 10. It brought in just under $1 million and is trying to crack that $50 million domestic mark. Overall, compared to the same weekend last year, we were about 15.2% lower. A Minecraft movie had a little more staying power. It also had been open for 2 days less than the Super Mario Galaxy movie. But again, that's not a huge drop-off considering that we had 2 big box office hits in the marketplace at the same time. Still, though, because of the Minecraft movie, and actually really because there's a bit of a stronger bench behind a Minecraft movie, we were a bit lower than this time last year. But again, if you look at this chart, we made up a lot of ground in March, so we can afford to lose just a little bit of ground in April, especially when we're still having a high-performing weekend. Year-to-date, the box office is still over $2.2 billion. So let's look at some of the movies specifically in the top 10, and we will start with the number 1 movie, the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Overall, this was the third best weekend for any movie so far this year at $68 million. That comes in behind only the opening weekend of Super Mario Galaxy and then the opening weekend of Project Hail Mary. The second weekend of the Super Mario Galaxy movie comes in ahead of the opening of Scream 7, the second weekend of Project Hail Mary, the opening of Hoppers, the third weekend of Avatar Fire and Ash back in January, the opening of Wuthering Heights, the third weekend of Project Hail Mary, and the second weekend of Hoppers. The Super Mario Galaxy movie is also already the third highest grossing video game movie of all time. It's moved ahead of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Right now, it trails only a Minecraft movie and the Super Mario Brothers movie. The first Sonic the Hedgehog movie is in 6th place now, followed by Uncharted, Pokemon Detective Pikachu, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Lara Croft Tomb Raider. If you adjust for inflation, the Super Mario Galaxy movie has also moved up to number 3 on that list. It's ahead of Lara Croft Tomb Raider and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Most of these are the same movies except for Pokemon. The first movie, I know some people said, well, that shouldn't count as a video game movie because it was much more of a trading card thing. I know you just have to set limits at some point point or these charts become chaos, and Pokemon was a video game, so it makes the top 10. And right now, when you compare the performances of the Super Mario Brothers movie, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and a Minecraft movie, it's an interesting tale so far. These are their cumulative grosses through 12 days of release. You can see that a Minecraft movie jumped out to a big lead in its first 3 days. That's because both Super Mario Brothers films opened on Wednesday, not Friday. So a Minecraft movie jumped out big, but then you had the Super Mario Brothers movies closing the gap as they got through their first actual 3-day weekend of release. But the thing to really pay attention to is how that red line, which is the Super Mario Brothers movie, jumps through the last 3 days of release, because that is the second weekend of release. And you can see how that staying power really has helped it open up a gap between these two movies. Between a Minecraft movie and the Super Mario Galaxy movie, we're just going to have to see how things play out over the next week or two to see which one of these movies is going to end up on top, because the difference in release structure right now makes their comparable days hard to draw any major conclusions from. But I think what we're going to see is that red line continue to extend that gap to get out further along, because the Super Mario Brothers movie was really such a phenomenon when it was released. The Super Mario Galaxy movie is now also one of the highest grossing April releases of all time. It's the 7th highest grossing April release, behind Furious 7, 2016's The Jungle Book, a Minecraft movie, the Super Mario Brothers movie, and then of course Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. It has already outgrossed Sinners, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. This was a bit of a difficult choice for me, but it actually opened in limited release in April, even though it made most of its money through the summer months. So it is technically an April release. That's why it's listed there in the 10 spot. And normally I would do an adjusted for inflation chart on April releases, but it has been absolutely, not impossible, but much more difficult to do in-depth box office research in the past few weeks, because as we've talked about for quite a while now, Box Office Mojo stripped a lot of the functionality out of their site, and my other main go-to site, The Numbers, was completely down for maintenance for a while. It's back up, but only has a fraction of the searchability that it used to. And there are really no other resources that are as in-depth as those two. I even tried, just out of curiosity, to see what it would be like to try to use Google Gemini as a research source. And I actually had to correct the AI results 5 or 6 times before I just gave up, because I said, give me a list of the 10 highest grossing films in April. And it gave me a completely wrong list. I corrected it. It still gave me a completely wrong list. Just FYI, PSA for people that use AI as some kind of a research tool, which I do from time to time. You have to double check it, because it was very, very wrong when I asked it to pull historical box office data. So as functionality returns, hopefully to The Numbers over time, I can do more in-depth research. It's just that to do it manually would take 3 or 4 times longer than it already took right now. And just my schedule does not accommodate that at the moment. Let's get to this week's Charts with Dan trivia question, and it involves the voice of Mario, Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt has appeared in multiple franchises now with big box office grosses. What is his highest grossing non-franchise film domestically? By non-franchise, I mean that no sequels were made to the film, and it does not feature characters that were from earlier films. I'll give you a second to think about it. I was actually surprised by the answer, maybe because he's not the star of the movie, if that helps you to narrow it down. And here comes the answer. The answer is Wanted, back in 2008, which made $134.5 million. Now, if you want to say, well, that doesn't count because Chris Pratt is a supporting character in the film, then the answer would be Passengers, which made just around $100 million. So Chris Pratt, lots of money at the box office in franchise films, but only a couple of $100 million films when you remove franchises from the equation. And let's move on to the results of last week's member poll. I asked what movie that doesn't have a video game would make the best video game, and the winner was a Quentin Tarantino film, Kill Bill. 26 votes came in saying they thought that Kill Bill would make the best video game. In second place was Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat, based on what era you grew up in, I guess. It got 21 votes. A recent film from last year and an Oscar winner, Sinners, came in third place with 13 votes. Then we have Dredd coming in at 11 votes. Now, there have been video games featuring Judge Dredd, but according to my research, none of those games were based on the actual movie Dredd, so I allowed it. And Inception came in 5th place with 10 votes. Now, technically, Highlander was tied for 5th place with 10 votes, but I had to disqualify Highlander due to the existence of a computer game released back in the 80s when the original movie was coming out. I know, that's not exactly a widely played game, but, again, sometimes you just have to set hard and fast rules or the show just becomes chaos. And let's get to our Charts with Dan member poll question for this week. We just looked at the 10 highest grossing movies that were released in April. I want to know which one of those 10 movies is your favorite. And I think that there is some pretty healthy competition there and a lot of different types of movies. I'm going to do this like I've done in previous member polls. I will make a comment for each of the 10 movies. Upvote that comment. Those are how the official votes are going to be tallied. I won't count any votes that are not upvotes of my actual comments. That's how I'm able to do these longer poll options, because YouTube has a set limit for how you can do a traditional poll. So upvote my official comment for each of these movies, and we'll see who wins on next week's show. Let's talk a little bit about Project Hail Mary. First of all, it is now number 5 when it comes to highest grossing non-sequels of the 2020s. I think that's where it was last week as well, but you can see that it is closing in on Sinners. It's now only about $23 million behind the final gross of Sinners. And now we're looking at it winding up potentially in the Oppenheimer area. I don't think it's going to get up to a Minecraft movie. I don't think it's going to get up. It's definitely not going to get up to where Barbie is. But I wanted to look at Project Hail Mary's performance compared to Sinners and Oppenheimer, because when it comes to movies this decade, it's in a similar performance zone as far as domestic box office. This is Project Hail Mary's performance against Oppenheimer and Sinners. Now, it is tracking ahead of Sinners, but again, that's kind of a baseline, because again, Sinners did very well and had a much lower budget, by the way, than Project Hail Mary. But it has been going pretty much step for step with Oppenheimer through 24 days of release. They had similar opening weekends. Oppenheimer's been ahead most of the way, but Project Hail Mary is starting to close that gap. So it looks very likely that we're going to see that film end up in that $330 million range, and it may outgross Oppenheimer when all is said and done. So I will continue to track this over the next few weeks to see where Project Hail Mary winds up. I mentioned the drama is at $30.8 million domestically. That is significant because it is now one of A24's 10 highest grossing domestic releases. It displaces, I believe, Baby Girl from this list, and it's got a lot of room to grow. It's $5 million behind The Iron Claw, $6.5 million behind Materialists, and within $20 million of Hereditary, Talk to Me, Lady Bird, and Uncut Gems. That would put it in the top 5. So the drama doing very well for A24. This is the Pixar franchise tracker. I want to look at where Hoppers is relative to other Pixar movies. It is at $157.1 million. That puts it ahead of Cars 3 and Elemental. And it's only about $5 million behind A Bug's Life for number 20 on this list. I think that's about as high as the movie is going to go. I've said, and I continue to say, I think that this is a moderate box office success. It's not something that goes up to the level of even a Coco, which came out back in 2017. It would be nice to see it break $200 million. It doesn't look like it's going to do that. When you look at grosses adjusted for inflation, and again, this is not me attacking the movie, it's just something about perspective. Hoppers is really only ahead of 3 films, Leo from last year, Onward from 2020, and Lightyear from 2022. Depending on how it does from here on out, I guess there's the possibility that it gets up above Elemental and The Good Dinosaur. But this is a good performance for an original Pixar film, a recovery from what we've seen in recent years, but not something that goes up to the level of what we've seen before. And again, this is not me attacking the film. I liked the movie. I just think that we have to look at these numbers realistically instead of saying they're back to form. The Pixar's back to where they were. They're not, but this is certainly an encouraging performance that maybe they're getting there. There were 4 movies that dropped out of the top 10 this past weekend. Scream 7 is out after 6 weeks. Durandar the Revenge is out after 3 weeks. Ready or Not, Here I Come is out after 3 weeks. And They Will Kill You is out after 2 weeks. I still don't think that They Will Kill You was done any favors by being released the weekend after Ready or Not, Here I Come. I mean, even if you look at those 2 posters, even the marketing looked similar for those films. I've heard that They Will Kill You actually compares favorably to Ready or Not. But I just think that was a bad release window to pick, because based on how the movies were marketed, they were sold as very similar movies. These were the biggest theater count changes for this past weekend, and They Will Kill You actually lost the most theaters, lost 1,465. It's still in 813. Reminders of Him lost 954 theaters. It's still in just over 1,400. Ready or Not lost 950 theaters. It's in 1,110. Goat lost over half of its remaining theaters, 709 of them. It's still in 405. Scream 7 lost 512 theaters. It's still in 618. Let's turn now from the domestic box office to the international box office. This is all markets outside of the US and Canada. And the top grossing film was the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which made $83.5 million. That's a 54.2% decrease internationally from last weekend. Project Hail Mary brought in $30.6 million, which is a 27.3% drop internationally, so it continues to put up good holds around the world. In third place, we have Detective Conan, Fallen Angel of the Highway, which brought in $26 million. This is a big opening in Japan. It's now an annual event to have a Detective Conan movie come out in Japan. The drama actually was a little bit bigger in its second weekend internationally. It was up 2.9% to bring in $14 million, and Hoppers dropped 40% to bring in another $7.4 million. When you take those international grosses, you combine it with our domestic grosses, we get the top 5 films worldwide, and for the second week in a row, they are the same 5 movies in the same order. The Super Mario Galaxy movie brought in another $151.6 million. That's a 51.7% drop overall worldwide. Its global total is now at $628.5 million. Project Hail Mary dropped 25.8% worldwide for a $54.7 million weekend. It has now cracked the $500 million mark worldwide. Detective Conan, Fallen Angel of the Highway only opened in Japan, so that $26 million mark remains where it was in the international charts. The drama dropping 18.9% overall worldwide for another $22.7 million. Its worldwide total now at $62.1 million. And Hoppers dropped 36.6% for an $11.5 million weekend. It's now over $350 million globally. And when the final numbers came in, the Super Mario Galaxy movie put up the 4th best weekend worldwide of any film this year, coming in right behind the opening 3-day weekend of Pegasus 3. They were almost tied with each other. The top 2 weekends of the year are the opening of the Super Mario Galaxy movie at number 1, and then way behind is Avatar Fire and Ash back on the weekend of January 2nd. Project Hail Mary has the 5th and 6th best weekends of the year, followed by the opening weekend of Scream 7. Then we have Hoppers opening weekend at number 8, Avatar Fire and Ash from January 9th, and the January 2nd performance of Zootopia 2. The drama is also now one of A24's highest grossing releases worldwide at $62.1 million. It comes in right behind Baby Girl and Moonlight, so it will pass those this week. And depending on how it does, this could be the 5th A24 release to crack the $100 million mark worldwide. The highest grossing A24 release of all time worldwide, of course, Marty Supreme, which set that mark earlier this year. Let's return to the domestic box office and take a look at some of what I call our specialty charts. And we'll start with the top per theater averages for this past week. At number 1 was the documentary Steal This Story, Please, which brought in $31,845 playing in one theater. Steal This Story is a documentary about journalist Amy Goodman, known for her news show Democracy Now! In second place was The Christophers, which is the latest film from Steven Soderbergh. We mentioned it on last week's show. Steven Soderbergh caught some heat during the promotion for this film, talking about his enthusiastic use of AI in upcoming projects. In third place, we have the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which brought in $15,892 per theater in each of its over 4,200 theaters. Then we have the re-release of the film Reunion, again playing in one theater. It brought in about $6,500 per theater in that same theater, and that was actually an increase on last weekend. And finally, we have Project Hail Mary, rounding out the top 5. It brought in about $6,300 per theater in each of its over 3,800 theaters. In limited release, which I define as fewer than 1,000 theaters, Exit 8 leads the way. It was only in 495 theaters, but it was a top 10 movie. It made $1.4 million. Durandar the Revenge, in its 4th week of release, playing in 309 theaters, brought in $670,000. In third place is, I'm going with what sounds like the French pronunciation, De Quoi, A Love Story. Maybe it's Decoit. I don't know. I'm sure somebody knows out there. I'm always corrected on pronunciation stuff. Regardless, it was playing in 450 theaters and brought in $592,000. This is an Indian action romance that was shot in both Telugu and Hindi, so a multi-language film. Rob Radio 3 comes in fourth place at $376,000. And in fifth place, we have the latest version of Hamlet playing in 325 theaters. Not a whole lot of appeal for that. Just brought in $185,000. This is the 2026 annual domestic box office chart, and we have another new #1 movie of the year. Of course, it is the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which takes over that spot from Project Hail Mary. It's down to #2. Hoppers is the third highest grossing film of the year, followed by Scream 7 and Goat. Wuthering Heights, Send Help, Reminders of Him, Iron Lung, and Crime 101 round out the top 10. This is the annual domestic box office this year if you include all tickets sold. So the Super Mario Galaxy movie and Project Hail Mary are the top 1 and 2 movies of the year, and Hoppers has passed Avatar: Fire and Ash to become the third highest grossing movie of the year when all movies are included. Avatar: Fire and Ash dropping down to fourth place, followed by Scream 7 and Goat. Zootopia 2 is at #7, followed by Wuthering Heights, The Housemaid, and Send Help. And this is the worldwide box office for the year so far. Pegasus 3 right now is at #1 at $641 million, but the Super Mario Galaxy movie will be taking over that spot. And if you remember last year, after Nudja 2 opened early in the year, that was the #1 movie worldwide for the rest of the year. So a Hollywood movie retakes that #1 spot for 2026. Pegasus 3 is going to move down eventually to #2. Project Hail Mary, the third highest grossing movie of the year at $510 million. And then the rest of the top 10 is unchanged from last week. Hoppers, Wuthering Heights, Scream 7, Blades of the Guardians, Scare Out, Goat, and Durandar the Revenge. So that's what's happening at the box office. Let's take a look now at the world of streaming, and we'll start with the latest numbers from Netflix. New ones will come out later today. This covers the week of March 30th through April 5th, and the most watched program globally on Netflix was the third season of Exo Kitty, which is a spinoff from the To All the Boys movie series. The first week of season 3 brought in 12.9 million views. In second place is a movie called Humant, which is a South Korean film about spies from North and South Korea who have a showdown in Russia. That brought in 10.99 million views. Then we have the 2025 version of Anaconda, which brought in 9.94 million views. At #4 is the Netflix documentary Untold, The Death and Life of Lamar Odom, chronicling the former NBA star, at 8.44 million views. Eat, Pray, Bark, which is a German comedy film, you could almost say parody film, comes in 5th place. It's about dog owners who meet up at an exclusive training retreat and brought in 6.98 million views. At #6 is the Netflix series. And okay, so last week I talked about the fact that this series was about a character named Harry Hole, because it's called Detective Hole Season 1, except it's not. As I said, I am corrected on pronunciation if I get even a syllable wrong. And apparently in the native tongue, it is Hule. But you have to know in English, if you have a detective called Harry, Harry, Hule, Hole, that dumb English speakers like me are going to make jokes, but apparently it's more like Hara Hule. But anyway, it looks like Harry Hole in the English pronunciation. Regardless, it brought in 6.93 million views, and I once again got a tutorial on how to pronounce things not in the English language. At #7 is the Netflix series Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen with 6.9 million views. At #8, we have the true crime documentary, The Truth and Tragedy of Mariah Wilson, which is about the murder of an elite cyclist. At #9 is The Red Line, which is a Netflix movie, bringing in 6.44 million views. The Red Line is from Thailand, about a group of women looking for revenge on the phone scammers who took their money. And at #10, we have, for a second week in a row, Mardani 3. Looking at the most watched Netflix programs in 2026, the only real change on this list is that War Machine is officially, according to the Netflix ratings that have been released by the company, the most watched program of the year at 118.1 million views. That puts The Rip down in second place at 114.7 million views. The rest of the top 10 remains the same. Let's move now from the Netflix ratings to the Nielsen ratings. Now, unlike the ones we just watched, these are domestic ratings only. They're not global, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to release that data. So this covers the week of March 9th through the 15th, and let's look first at the top streaming movies. At number 1 was Zootopia 2, which made its debut on Disney Plus and brought in 28.58 hours watched, easily number 1 for the week. War Machine comes in second place at 16.48 million hours watched. Then we have Nuremberg, which made its streaming debut on Netflix at 6.93 hours watched. Nobody 2 also made a move over to Netflix and brought in 6.43 million hours watched. The first Zootopia rounds out the top 5, followed by Jurassic World Rebirth. Then we had the debut of Melania on Amazon Prime Video after its theatrical release earlier this year. It brought in 3.38 million hours watched. K-Pop Demon Hunters is at number 8 with 3.2 million hours watched. If you noticed on the Netflix top 10 chart for this week, for only the second time since its release, K-Pop Demon Hunters dropped off, but it's still on the Nielsen top 10 charts. Trolls is at number 9, and Jurassic World Dominion is at number 10. And Zootopia 2's opening week performance on Disney Plus was the best performance we've seen from any movie on streaming domestically so far this year. It comes in ahead of the first 2 weeks of The Rip, the opening week of The Wrecking Crew on Amazon, and the opening week of War Machine over on Netflix. So Zootopia 2, so far the biggest draw, including even original movies on streaming in 2026, at least here in the United States. These were the most watched streaming shows from March 9th through the 15th. At number 1 was the return of One Piece with 26.96 million hours watched. That is a higher number than we saw for the first season 2 or 3 years ago. That's an increase in hours watched, although the first week of season 1 was just season 1. Remember, Nielsen measures viewership for all seasons together, so it's likely that viewership for season 2 alone was lower. What we're seeing is a combined watch time for seasons 1 and 2, but we'll take the wins where we can get them. Virgin River is at number 2 with 23.116 million hours watched. Then we have The Pit staying in third place. Scarpetta on Amazon Prime Video, a new series, debuts at number 4 with 15.86 million hours watched. Bridgerton is at number 5, followed by Grey's Anatomy, The Big Bang Theory, and Bluey. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives returns to the top 10 at 12 million hours watched, and Family Guy rounds out the top 10 at 10.6 million hours watched. And I mentioned Scarpetta. It had the third best debut of the year for a new streaming series at 15.86 million hours watched. That comes in ahead of The Burbs and Young Sherlock, but behind Reality Check, Inside America's Next Top Model, and His and Hers, which debuted on the first week of the year and brought in 23.1 million hours watched. These were the top streaming shows on Nielsen when you measure by watch time per available episode. So you take the number of hours watched, divide it by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how you get this number. At number 1 for, I believe, a second week in a row was The Dinosaurs on Netflix, which brought in 2.27 million hours of watch time per episode. Then we have Scarpetta coming in second place at 1.98 million hours of watch time for each of its 8 episodes. One Piece comes in third place at 1.69 million hours per episode. Then we have the Netflix dating show Age of Attraction at 1.6 million hours per episode. The Pit is in the 5th spot, followed by Paradise at number 6, Bridgerton at number 7, The Night Agent at number 8, Virgin River at number 9, and The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, rounding out the top 10 with just over 300,000 hours of watch time per episode. And those are all the numbers I have for you this week. Before we go, though, I wanted to point out a couple things you might be interested in, both on streaming and in theaters this upcoming week. Tomorrow on Amazon Prime Video, we have the debut of a new original movie called Balls Up. It's directed by Peter Farrelly and is the latest film from Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who were the writers of Deadpool. Mark Wahlberg and Paul Walter Hauser play marketing executives who interfere with the World Cup in Brazil and have to escape the country in one piece. On Thursday, the second season of Beef debuts on Netflix. Oscar Isaac, Carey Mulligan, Charles Melton, and Kaylee Spaney star in the second season of the Netflix anthology series about strangers who collide with each other in explosive ways. Also on Thursday, we have the season 2 finale of The Pit on HBO Max, one of the only shows right now that is absolute must-watch viewing for me as soon as the new episode releases. And I neglected to mention this last week because it's just so hard to map everything that's airing everywhere. But Taskmaster is back. Another show that for me is appointment television. The 21st season or series, Jason, as they might say over in the UK, debuted last week. So the first episode's already aired. It airs on the UK's Channel 4 on Thursday night, but releases globally on YouTube on Fridays. So you don't have to have a VPN or you don't have to live in the UK to watch it. If you haven't seen Taskmaster, it is one of my very favorite shows on the air. Kumail Nanjiani is on this season. Armando Iannucci is on this season. It looks like it's going to be really funny. I'm very sad I neglected to mention its return last week. Taskmaster is back. I love those 10 weeks when Taskmaster is on the air. Then we have a few movies opening in theaters on Friday. The first is Lee Cronin's The Mummy, which is not associated with any official Mummy franchise, but it is about a mummy. It's about a young girl who returns to her family as something different after being lost for years in the desert. Lee Cronin directed Evil Dead Rise a couple years ago, which is a movie I quite enjoyed. Also playing in theaters this weekend is the movie Normal, which is the latest film in Bob Odenkirk's action era. He plays a small-town sheriff who's forced to become, basically an action hero. It's from director Ben Wheatley, who brought us the movies Free Fire and Meg 2: The Trench, among others. Playing in limited release this upcoming weekend and expanding wide next weekend is Mother Mary, which is David Lowery's latest film. It's being released through A24. Anne Hathaway plays the titular character, a Lady Gaga-esque pop star who re-teams with a former friend, played by Michaela Cole. And then, of course, because this is a David Lowery A24 joint, strange things start to happen. Also opening in limited release this week is a movie called Waste Man, starring David Johnson and Tom Blythe, who play cellmates. It's a prison drama, and I see that it's gotten excellent early reviews. I think it may have already opened in the UK. In limited release this upcoming weekend is a new documentary called Lorne, which is about SNL creator and producer Lorne Michaels. And the documentary is from Morgan Neville, who's a great documentarian. He's taken on subjects like Mr. Rogers, Paul McCartney, and Anthony Bourdain in recent years. He won an Oscar for his film 20 Feet from Stardom. And finally, in limited release is the documentary Everyone is Lying to You for Money, which is from Ben McKenzie. Yes, the guy who was on Gotham. He makes his directing debut in this documentary about the cryptocurrency world, and I'm guessing you know where he stands from the title, which I believe is based on a book or publication of some kind. Then on Saturday, as I mentioned earlier, you can catch another BTS live viewing of their concert in Tokyo. And we have a 2-day weekend event coming up, WrestleMania 42. I remember when this was just a day, but apparently now it's 2. I'm guessing money has something to do with it. It'll be streaming on the ESPN app as well as the ESPN linear networks. It is wrestling's biggest event, taking place in Las Vegas for a second consecutive year. I think that money probably has something to do with that as well. Night 1 wrestlers on Saturday include Logan Paul, sure, Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, and Randy Orton, who's apparently in league with ESPN personality Pat McAfee. Boy, I don't understand what's going on right now in wrestling. I'm way out of touch. Then on Sunday, which is WrestleMania 42 Day 2, we have wrestlers including Brock Lesnar and a championship fight between CM Punk and Roman Reigns. And that's what I've got for you this week. I will be back tomorrow with my live show, and I've also got some stuff coming up. I don't know. There's so much to review and look at this week. I'll be back with something the rest of the week. Not every week is meticulously planned out, and I'm taking it maybe a little bit easier than I usually do just because we're almost at the summer movie season, which means I'm going to be on the road more and reviewing more big movies. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you're interested in more, I did a video on the rise and fall of Bad Robot this past weekend that I'm very proud of, and you can stay tuned right here for everything else I do. Thanks so much for spending some time listening to me shout numbers at you. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.